Alright, so now on to slide 3. It talks about being an interpreter. If you look at slide 3 and slide 4, they look almost identical, other than one is labeled interpreter and the next one's labeled transliterator. And that's because basically you're doing a lot of the same thing. They're just different in how they are performed. A few things that are unique to being an interpreter, well, let me say this. A few things that are unique to being an interpreter who works with a deaf population. If I were a Spanish to English interpreter, there are certain things that I wouldn't have to do that I have to do as a sign language interpreter. For example, a Spanish to English or English to Spanish interpreter is not going to have to interpret any sounds. That person, the client, the consumers, both can hear those sounds for themselves, right? However, if I am voicing for a deaf teacher, and this has happened multiple times for me, if I'm voicing for a deaf teacher in their fingerspelling class, and there's thunder outside, I need to add that cue into the deaf person to let them know, hey, there's thunder outside. And I've had it before to where the teacher's like, oh, hey guys, let's take a break, I need to go roll up my windows. You know what I mean? Because they realize, oh, we don't have any windows in this classroom, I didn't know that it was thundering, I didn't know it was going to rain, you know? They need to know, I've been, especially with deaf teachers, that's funny, I have been the tattletale, basically. You know, they sit me to where I can hear everything that's going on, and I basically let the teacher know if there's any kind of cheating going on. I love it too because the students inevitably will say something to the teacher like, or they'll say something to each other like, how did she hear us? I thought she was deaf. And like, I'll sign that to the teacher and the teacher will look at them and of course I'll voice and say, you dorks, the interpreter told me. Anyway, I just think it's funny. What else? Any kind of sound cues. I mean, if the AC is too loud, if the person has an accent, very often I try to let the person know, the deaf person know if there's an accent of some sort. I thought it was kind of funny because anybody who goes to Sci-Fair, you may have met Georges Deteveau. He's the language lab coordinator. And Georges speaks French fluently. He's one of our French teachers, or adjunct teachers, part-time teachers. But he's from Louisiana. And so he is an American, and he sounds like an American. But he also dresses very fashionably. He has some very fashionable glasses and wears stylish clothes and things like that. And so the deaf people at a training one time, they asked me, they were like, does George have an accent? You know, and I'd never thought about that. I was like, no. I was like, what do you mean? And they were like, well, does he sound like he's from France? And I was like, oh no, you know, and I realized by the way his name is spelled, because he's got all those ridiculous letters that you don't need, and no offense if anybody speaks French, and you know, I mean, just the way he looks and the fact that he is a French teacher, I had never considered that before, you know. So they often want to know, and sometimes they'll even ask after you let them know that person has an accent. The deaf person may ask that person, and it starts an interaction between them like, oh, where are you from? The interpreter told me you have an accent, where are you from? And that's kind of neat because now they have a connection or a talking point to socialize. Anyway, also, if you ever end up interpreting for a deaf-blind person, now not only are you having to interpret sound information, you're also having to add in visual cues. So like this person is standing up and walking to the front to present, so-and-so is crying at the information that is being told, they turned the lights out, they did this, that, I mean, any kind of visual information that's going on, you need to be conveying that to them as well. Crazy, crazy amounts of interpreting you do when you're working with deaf-blind people. Anyway, I love it though, it's a lot of fun. One last thing that I want to mention before we get into some of the specifics of the slide is just interpreting models. I forgot to email that to you guys, and so I'm going to email that out to you, and I'll try to also post it on the lessons page. But especially when you look at the Coakley interpreting model, and you'll see what I mean when you get this, but it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous to see what your brain is doing when you're interpreting or transliterating, for that matter. It is crazy. I mean, it's like this crazy flow chart of, you know, you do this and then your brain is doing this and you're thinking this and da da da. I mean, if this, then this. I mean, it's just crazy. It's like, this is your brain on interpreting any questions. It's crazy. So anyway, I'll send that to you guys in a separate email. Anyway, getting on to it though, being an interpreter, obviously, as I mentioned in the last video, you have to be bilingual and bicultural. If you don't know both languages and both cultures, how can you possibly effectively interpret? You can't. I so often have, and I'm sorry if any of you guys are these people, but I so often have potential students come into my office and say, I can be an interpreter, I probably don't even need to take any of the classes, I just wanted to ask you what's on the test. I was like, oh, okay, sure, that's fine. And I'm like, so you know sign language? Well, I know how to fingerspell some, and I know like the sign for cat and deaf, and I'm just thinking, oh my gosh. And they're like, but my deaf friends understand me when I fingerspell to them, so I'm pretty sure that I'm a good interpreter. Okay, no. Let me be very clear. Your deaf friends are good interpreters. They are able to take your crap, okay, because that's what it is, alright, and they are able to interpret it for you. Okay, that's what's happening. So often we, as sign language interpreters in particular, we think, oh, I'm better at signing than I am voicing. That is never going to be true. Never going to be true. And let me tell you why. I know you're going to disagree with me, because I would have disagreed with me as a student. I would have disagreed with myself. Let me tell you why. You're always going to interpret better into your native language. So if my native language is English, I'm always going to interpret better into it. I'm always going to sound more grammatically correct. I'm going to, I hope my English is decent, I'm sorry if it sucks. Anyway, but in general, I should always interpret better into that. Now, the reason that we're not better interpreting into the target language of sign language, unless it's your native, some of you guys may be codas, and in that case that is your native language, but the reason that we're never going to be better at doing that is because we, again, are relying on the deaf person's ability to take what we've given them and to reinterpret it for us. I guarantee you that's happening. Guarantee you. If you ever watch videos, I highly suggest this, and I do this with my own students, I force them to do this in class, is to videotape yourself interpreting something, sign interpreting something, and then turn off the sound. And now you try to watch yourself. Don't fill in the gaps. I would do it, I would even watch it maybe a week after you had interpreted it or something like that, just to give your brain some time to forget the English, and try to see if what you're signing even makes sense. You know, I hate watching videos of myself because of that. And so, anyway, just know that that's not usually the case. You're not usually going to be a better sign interpreter than you are a voice interpreter. Something else I was going to say about that. Oh, one example, and for you guys who speak Spanish, maybe you'll think this is funny. I went to a transition fair day a few semesters ago with some of my students for Sci-Fair ISD. It was a wonderful idea from the school district. They set up this fair for high schoolers and their parents, deaf high schoolers and their parents, to come to let the deaf high school parents, or the deaf high schoolers' parents, usually they were hearing parents, know what their rights were for their children, that they could have an interpreter, that they could get a video phone, that they could do all these things. Wonderful. And what some of their post-secondary opportunities were. It was great. But I was watching, they also had Spanish-speaking interpreters there, Spanish to English interpreters. And one of them, I speak enough Spanish to understand, you know, one of them, I saw her get stuck on a concept, and I was so excited because I was like, how is she going to handle this? How is she going to handle this? And so she was like, the word was sticker, and I could tell she was stuck, and she's like, sticker. You know, she put an E in front of it, and that made it sticker. And I just thought it was so funny. If you say it with a Spanish accent, now it is a Spanish word. And I'm really not picking on her, because honestly, here's the funny thing, is that anytime you fingerspell something to a deaf person, you are saying sticker. That's what you're doing. You're putting English out with a sign language accent on it. That's all you're doing. So just think about that. That's all. We'll talk more about interpreting and transliterating in the next video. Thanks.